But let's start with how long have we heard that there's a deadline looming? Ross Dellenger with a great article on Friday. He's going to join us today at 4:20. A deadline looms. An agreement is absent. We know that the revenue sharing is still trying to be negotiated between the 4 autonomy school conferences, the group of 5, Notre Dame, etc. And I saw the last percentage was 58% Big Ten SEC, 31% ACC and Big 12, and 11% Notre Dame, and also group of 5. They got to bang that out. They need a revenue thing. They need to fix the format. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina. We've heard the deadline. What's going to happen if, in fact, somebody tells the Power 2 to go ahead and leave? What do you think the reaction would be?
I think right now, nothing. Because I think at this point, the Power 2, the Super 2, trademark Craig Smoak, 2022. 2022.
Yep.
So 2022. I think right now they would not. I think actually that's one of the things they can do to maybe keep them, like go ahead and do it, but there's no governance, there's no structure, there's no plan. So right now they would do it. The problem is if you do it and they say, okay, no, we're going to stay now, it doesn't mean they're not going to spend the next few years building that plan and leave eventually. While I know it would not be good for everybody else, it at least would provide direction and clarity and would take that weapon out of the arsenal for the Super 2 to just say, well, if we don't like what, if you don't give us everything we want, we're going to leave. If you don't give us everything we want, we're going to leave. And I do think that somebody needs to stand up and say, look, you want all these, buys or all this stuff to be handed to you. If you really are the best 2 conferences, then it's just probably going to happen. And the years that it doesn't are going to be so rare that you won't even remember it. I mean, that's the other thing. They are trying to, I know it's all about money, but they're trying to ward off something that is going to be so unlikely to happen most years, given the size and depth and power of those conferences and the brands and the teams that they have in them and will have in them in the future, because let's face it, this is not over. They're not done growing. If that's the case, then what future are they guarding against? Where one year the Big Ten doesn't get 4 teams in? Oh, bummer. All right, well, that's the breaks for 2029, 2030. They might get 5. You have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, we all know at this point it's greed driving everything. It's tribalism to a certain extent, too. At least tribalism a lot when it comes to the arguments that you see of why they deserve to have more and why they deserve to always demand more and this and that. You should be happy to just have a seat at the table. And I'll go back to what I said last week. It's come to a point now where you're basically making it seem as though you're going to get your way regardless. So capitulate to us. Let's go ahead and get our way so we can move on to the next thing, as opposed to fight us. We eventually get our way, and then we move on to the next thing. So, yeah, I said last week, if you're the Big 12, I know it's very uncertain right now with the ACC. I mean, that's a big lever that hasn't been pulled just yet that we know could get pulled at some point, and when it does, it's going to shake things up. But, at some point, yeah, you have to just sit there and kind of draw a little bit of a line in the sand. I mean, if you're if you're the Big 12, if you're the ACC, if you feel like the ACC is going to still be somewhat what it is or close to what it is in the years moving forward, you eventually have to put your foot down a little bit. And if they decide, okay, well, you decided to fight back, we're going to brush you off and move past you anyways, then that's the breaks. But that's the risk that you run, because it's just, again, it goes back to this. The money gap is already so large because the TV networks have determined that. And we know they're pulling strings behind the scenes. And it's not in their best interest or in their pocketbook's best interest to sit there and throw a bunch of money at the Big 12 so that it's all even. So there's already that disparity. But when you start getting into what some of the demands seem to be with the college football playoff, that grows even more substantially, to the point of you're having like a $70 to $80 million advantage over the teams that you're competing against on quote-unquote equal ground. So at a certain point, if you're Oklahoma State or you're Baylor or you're TCU or whoever, yeah, you want to keep up with the quote-unquote Joneses or whatever, but at some point you have to look at what's best for us. And is what's best for us sitting there trying to just go into the red constantly to just keep up when there's an $80 million or whatever the figure is, tens of millions of dollar advantage from schools that couldn't even sniff our jockstrap in most sports, but they have this monetary advantage, not to mention the ones that have tons of other built-in advantages over us. Are we going to sit there and really try to pretend that we can keep pace and stress ourselves over trying to scratch every single dollar out? Or do we eventually just go, all right, you guys go do whatever you're going to do. We're going to pay our players the best we can, but we can't afford to pay them all like an NFL team. So y'all go do that thing that y'all are clearly planning and trying to do that you don't really want us to be a part of, and we'll go do our thing that hopefully is consistent not only with college football, but also does have some of the new elements to it, such as paying players. But we can't pay like Ohio State pays. We can't even pay now like Rutgers pays because the TV deals and the potential playoff payments are so extraordinarily different. So, that's where I come from on this. For one, I hope that the playoff discussion by the end of the week or here pretty soon just ceases. Like, can the playoff committee just go away for a while so we can talk about spring ball and other things? Because we've been hearing about you guys a lot, and I understand why here lately. But at some point, y'all don't need to be a year-round sport. Y'all need to go back to your little official designations with your universities and go do that for a while, and then let's reconvene because we've been hearing way too much from you guys, and I get it. But soon we need to not hear anything from y'all for a little while. So that's kind of touching on everything there. But, yeah, I think the question for the Big 12 and some ACC members, and, again, it's so hard to even kind of peg them because we don't know what that's going to be, but is a breakoff going to substantially hurt you to where you're not making anywhere near what you would be making if you were to still go and abide by this playoff the way that the Big Ten and the SEC wanted? Does that make sense?
Yep.
If you're going to make $40 million per school in this new setup that's clearly arranged to favor one side significantly, and I understand they have the most ratings and the biggest schools and all that, but it is a very unbalanced, matchup here. If that's still better than what you would get otherwise, then maybe you just have to bite the bullet and go through with that. But if there is an alternative where you just throw your hands up and you say, look, we want to pay our players too, but we're not making the same money you guys are making, we got to go and do it a different way, then that's what you have to weigh, and I think that's what the Big 12 and others are probably weighing right now.
All right, according to Ross, and he'll join us at 4:20, Adam Rittenberg, ESPN, today at 3:30, and also his story last week about the most intriguing quarterback competitions, et cetera, coming up in 2024. So if, in fact, as of now, 58% of $1.3 billion, this is, again, floating out there, discussions, negotiations, it could be also a little bit of speculation. $1.3 billion annually. And the way that would be split up is the Big Ten and the SEC would get 58% of that. The Big 12 and the ACC would get 31%, and then the others, again, would get about 11, Notre Dame and Group of 5. What that would be approximately, if that percentage worked, is this enough to say that they're separating themselves even further? Because right now, based on the new television revenue, et cetera, there is probably a $25 to $40 million gap that's about to be there, if not already. The SEC would get each team $23 million apiece. The Big Ten, $21 million. Why would they take less than the SEC? Numbers of teams, I don't know. ACC, 13.7, Big 12, 12.3, and Group of 5 teams around $2 million apiece. $2 million apiece is what they would share based on, as Craig just mentioned, and also the figure that's out there. We're going to have some ADs. We've already had Chris Pesman was on Friday. We've had Jamie Pollard. And the question is, what is the number in which you should walk away? What is the number? They're in Kansas City, the Big 12 ADs, presidents, or whoever's there, Brett Yormark and his staff too, because the women's tournament is about to converge with the men's tournament. What would be the number that you walk away and say no? Because on top of the $23 million each for the SEC or $21 for the Big Ten, does not include the increments or the units that you also can add by the numbers of teams that you're trying to at least say we should get 3 or 4.
Right, so if you get 4, and all of a sudden you've got already now double of the payout of what the other conference has on top of the playoff share that's already higher.
Could end up being 40.
On top of the television disparity that there already is, which is it's as big as it's probably ever been, no? With the new contracts that are rolling in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you add up the TV money disparity, and I get it. Hey, you have more teams, bigger markets, bigger populations, bigger crowds. Not debating that, not arguing against that. And Ohio State deserves more money than an Iowa State for television. I don't think we'll argue that. Now, when you go top to bottom and you start throwing in other schools, and that's when you get into other arguments. But between the television disparity, the playoff disparity, the number of teams that you add into that, especially when you're already trying to rig it up to where you're automatically going to have an extra team in, if not a couple extra teams in, that's a growing gap, boys. I mean, that's enough money to pay for an entire team like 5 times over, all scholarships, and everybody with hundreds of thousands of dollars, compared to a school that's already smaller, that doesn't have any of those advantages that you already have, trying to do the same thing and pay their guys the same. And it's like, what sport are we playing here?
There's also no way to make it up. That's where the Florida State argument comes in what they're trying to do with the ACC is, I'm sure they would be like, look, we'd be fine if we had a way to make this up, to say, okay, they've renegotiated this, they've done this, we've got this. What gives us an opportunity to do this? There's no way to do it. There are 0 ways to do it outside of blowing up a conference and hoping for the best for each individual team. And that's not really a good plan either. Like that is just playing into the monster even more. And I just, like, what do you do? Like, if you're a school like Washington State, if you're a school, like even a school that's in the other 2 autonomy conferences now, if you're one of those schools, how do you just make up that money? You can't do it, because if it was there for you, you'd already have it.
The only way you could make up increments of it is if you make a deep run with multiple teams in the college football playoff, if you're not put behind the 8 ball before the thing even starts.
But here's the thing. That's just, you said increments of it. Before the season starts, no matter how crappy a team may be, Alabama can go 14-0 or 0-14. They're still going to have more money than Clemson before it starts. Bottom line.
And also, if you are the Big 12 or let's say the ACC, go make that run. The other conferences are going to have twice as many teams as you, so they'll have, based on some of what was being floated out there, they're trying to have double the participants automatically, just based on affiliation. So they get more cracks at it.
They want more money, a larger chunk, and also more teams automatically.
More than you are. So again, it's another thing where the route to go and get that money, you're still at a disadvantage because you're outnumbered. And you're dealing with schools that have way more of everything than you do. So, yeah, it's rigged to where that's nearly impossible to do as well. Like the run of a TCU, and I said this last year with the expanded playoff, as a fan, I love it. As a fan of a school who I think can manage its way through that, yeah, I feel fine about it. If I was a fan of a school that's not as well equipped as an Oklahoma, as a Texas, a Michigan, name them all, or even some of the schools like a Mississippi State's more well-equipped than a far more successful brand than in most other conferences, just because they're in a league that pays out a lot of money. I mean, you're already dealing with that, but now, hey, this school's going to make like $20 million more than you per year, not because they're any good, but just because they happen to be at a good place, at the right place in history when leagues were being formed. They don't win as many games as you. They don't even invest as much, but they just make more money. And they're going to have that to spend on a roster, and they're going to have a much easier time trying to navigate a playoff where now you might have to win up to 4 games because they can pay their players and they can retain them and do that. So you're not only battling that, but now if you're an Oklahoma State or a Texas Tech or whoever, all of these things that we've already mentioned that you're dealing with, the gap's only grown wider, and now you're asking them to have to win another couple of games on top of the disadvantage they were already facing in a 4-team playoff in the NIL era. So it's asking a lot, and that's your only route is to go out and win, and normally that would be just the answer, and that really is the only answer right now, but you're asking them to go and win and do so at an extreme disadvantage when it comes to personnel and being able to have all the bells and whistles that a lot of your opponents will have who are automatically already at an advantage. So, yeah, it's a frustrating puzzle to try and figure out if you're Brett Yormark or the ACC folks who are, again, dealing with their own set of other very unique issues. And so that's why I just don't know what your answer would be right now, and that's why I'm sure there's a lot of great and interesting conversations happening, because is that still the meal that you have to sit there and swallow because the alternative isn't even better? Because what is the alternative, And so that's the dilemma that you have right now if you're not an SEC or a Big Ten school.
Paul, how many teams in the ACC before the new ones are added? 14?
Yeah.
And now they're going to add Stanford, Cal, and SMU.
Yeah.
So they'll have 17 teams.
Yeah.
Okay? Which means by adding those three, remember, they're not all going to get the full share. We've been through that. SMU negotiated that with the ACC. But also, the more teams you have, and everybody seems to be at, 16 or plus now. If you get, for example, the Big 12 will have 16 with the new 4 and losing 2. So they'll have 16 teams. The ACC is going to have to split their money over 17 teams, which, again, very, 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 very minimal. The units that you get by making the college football playoff, first of all, is will be approximately 3 to 5 million each. And then every time you advance, approximately 3 to 5 million every week or every round. So if you have 4 teams get in, there's another 20 million. If you have 1 team get in, there's maybe 5 million. And
is there a scenario in any circumstance where the Big 12 is getting 4 teams in? Absolutely not.
Under a one of those, just like all the planets lined up and somehow or another, but I'm talking about
the best 5
maybe in 25 years.
They're going to have one of the best league years ever to just match what others get automatically.
Yeah. And then based on the top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten will all have to get hurt. Like that kind of a thing that where everybody gets hurt,
let's also look at it the other way around. If you have the clout and you have the leverage and you have the logos and you have the attendance, the enrollments, the stadium size, and you are the alpha, most businesses I know are going to try to take advantage of that.
Oh, yeah, it's America.
We're not saying the SEC and Big 12 or Big 10 are stupid. What we're saying is that how much can you let, if you're ACC, Big 12, Group of 5, whoever, Notre Dame, how much more can you give up before you just can't keep up?
And that's where it is. Like, are you concerned about the ecosystem of college athletics and college football? Are you concerned about the ecosystem for the two of you, which is...
Greg Sankey has said many times, the ecosystem of college football.
Yes, but... that is, you got to make your actions say that and say, okay, well, this, we would like to have, more automatic buys and all that stuff, but also realize that, you're like, I know you're trying to get that money, but you'll get it most years anyway. And you're not going to be like, in the year that the SEC would only get 3 teams instead of the 4 they wanted, like, are they going to be like, oh, crap, we got to shut down the league because we didn't get that extra playoff revenue?
Who's going to say that at 2 years into it, a couple of the bigger Super 2s, maybe I don't like the way this is going. This isn't what we want, and then they try to force another hand.
Yeah,
all of that, we're going to hear from Adam. We'll hear from Ross Dellenger on it. But this is the week that you would think, as Craig said, figure it out, lock them in a room. My God, can we go into something else besides this? Although it's great for us and for you and for fans, at the same time, it can wear your ass and be numbing down.
Yeah, we just spent a couple years on the expanded playoff, and now they've got us onto the next chapter, and they have to get it done this week. Like, everything's like suddenly, like, it has to be done. It's like, didn't y'all just the last thing had to get done then? So I guess now this thing has to get done now. And okay, well, can we get to a point where you get everything done? And so, yeah, again, I keep using the word dilemma because I think that's what you're facing as the ACC and the Big 12 of, do you call a bluff or do you accept what may be the better offer, even though it puts you at extreme disadvantages that are going to be hard to overcome in any way, shape, or form, minus going on a run and having multiple teams win national titles, which is going to be harder than it was ever before because of the disadvantages that you face financially and the path to the actual playoff now. So that's why Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips and other folks get paid big money to figure those problems out. So again, I imagine those conversations happen at the basketball tournament are very interesting. And like, to your point about the SEC and Big Ten, I don't fault them at all. Like, nope. I mean, it is what it is. Like, you're at the top of the food chain, the apex predator, then, you are going to gobble up pray. And I guess in some ways, the Big 12 or the ACC or just the college football ecosystem is very vulnerable. And there's, some prey out there that maybe they're still wanting to hunt and take care of. And maybe they want the Big 12 to call their bluff. That's the thing that we don't know with the hands being dealt right now. Maybe that's exactly what they want to hear. They go, all right, you've seen this. We tried. We gave it our best effort. Everybody knows that's BS. Everybody knows their try is very half-hearted, but they can still say we tried and they decided to go and take their ball and go home. Or is there actually a real threat if the Big 12 or the ACC was to say, no, we're not going to do it this way? And then maybe you sit down and you have some different types of conversations. It's hard to know. Greg Sankey talks in like riddles now at this point. Have y'all noticed that? He's like very cryptic, and he's like, I know he's like a big book reader and all that, but I've just come across more of his tweets here lately, and he's trying to do the whole Twitter thing of being very cryptic sometimes, which is hard to figure out, but I guess that's the intent is to be that way. So, yeah, who knows what he's thinking or what the Big Ten is thinking, but they hold most of the cards, if not all the cards, and I think we all knew that this was on the horizon. I saw a comment of like basically the Big 12 waving the white flag. I don't think it's that. I think it's just trying to figure out where you fit in. Like, nobody's giving up, but, at some point you have to acknowledge it's like, okay, if you're two guys trying to fight 1,000, did you give up or did you just were you smart and just realize hey, we want to still be alive, so we're not going to go straight into our deaths here? I think that's what the Big 12's trying to figure out. It's not giving up. It's saying, is our future better at a major disadvantage, bigger than it's ever been, but still a part of the playoff? Or would we be better off with more like-minded teams under a slightly different system where we're all playing in the same sort of a ballpark and there's not a $60 million gap? That's what you, again, have to figure out, and that's what those main conversations, I think, boil down to. So that's a fascinating continuing storyline that I guess is going to have some sense of getting wrapped up this week to some extent.
If you look at the numbers,